Let's talk about 5 baits for early spring bass fishing, starting with the jig. The jig, of course, works year-round. The jig is a mainstay. It's very popular because it works really well. It's a great bait to fish. So why am I particularly singling it out for early spring? Well, that's because that's when the crawfish start to get active as the water warms up. Now, no crawfish, no, they don't hibernate during the winter, but they don't really move around much at all during the wintertime. But when the water starts to warm up, then they get active and start moving around. And man, they're just full of protein, man. It's a protein snack, and the bass are seeking them out. They start foraging on them as soon as the crawfish get active. And that could be up in the early 40s, the low 50s, that temperature range right in there. That's when you'll start catching a lot of bass on, matter of fact, some of the largest bass I've caught are in early spring when the water temp's 46, 47 degrees, and catch them on a jig. What jigs to use? I use a 3/8 ounce or a 1/2 ounce jig, typically a brown or a green colored jig. It's what I like to use with a Rage Craw trailer on it. That's my mainstay. And the trailer color is going to match the skirt color for me, and it does exceedingly well for me. I tend to fish it on long tapering points. I fish it in sharper drops, sharper banks, steep banks, ledges, that not up in the flats too much. I don't get too shallow. I may fish it a little bit, up to 5 feet, 4 feet deep, but I'm still not in that 2 foot, 3 foot range yet because the water temperature is still pretty cool. The best success I've had in catching bigger fish is on those drops immediately adjacent to shallower water, like in that 6 to 8 foot range, 6 to 10 foot range. And it bottoms out, right? There's like a big steep drop, and here's the bottom. And right on that edge, that crease, that's where those bass like to sit. You get that jig right down there and just crawl along that edge or hop it right along there. If you can find a transition area where it goes from a hard bottom to soft bottom or rocky bottom to sand, or maybe there's some trees and bushes and some weeds and then there's nothing, like right along those are like hot spots. Those are places to fish that jig. I like to throw it with a 7'4" medium heavy fast action rod with 12 to 15 pound fluorocarbon line. I like to use Seaguar Invisix line for this, mainly because in this time of year the water's pretty clear. And typically there's not a lot of weeds and cover to get hung up in, so I don't necessarily need braid. So going with the fluorocarbon works best for me. If I am throwing it in heavier cover though, I will up it to a braid, especially if it's vegetation type cover where the bass can get wrapped up around in there. Then you want some braid and maybe a little bit heavier rod. But typically that's what I'm fishing with during that time of year with a jig. The next bait is a suspending jerk bait. Now this, a lot of guys that have been fishing for bass for a long period of time will tell you early spring is prime time for suspending jerk baits, and for good reason. The bass just love them. Like, they crave it. I don't know why, but man, it can be a way of catching a ton of fish in a hurry. I like to use the Spro MixStick 110+1 or the Spro MixStick 85. The +1 gets down to about 12 feet and the 85 gets down to about 10 feet, 8 to 10 feet. Just depends on where the fish are holding that day, and targeting those similar areas, those long tapering points, those drop-offs, those steep banks, those areas where the fish are going to hold up and stage up and getting ready to go up into to spawn. Those are the best places to fish them. And because they're suspending, you can get that bait right down to where the fish are and then just let it sit there and entice them and just be right in their face and wait for them to obliterate it. Although typically they don't hit it that hard. Typically you just start to feel it pull on your rod. Like, there it is, the fish is there, it's that they got it. The key is getting that bait to suspend, and the baits, any kind of suspending bait, no matter what brand it is, they will vary how well they suspend in the water depending on the water temperature. So keep that in mind. Put that bait in the water and watch it. If it starts to sink too much or rise too much, change it out. For example, if it's sinking a bit, then change out that front hook with the next size smaller hook. If it's rising, then change it out with the next size larger hook. And usually that'll balance it out. If that doesn't, then go to the back hook and do the same thing. And if you have to, then change that middle hook. Slight changes and just the little bit of weight difference in those sizes of hook is all it takes to get it to balance out. But that's the key, to get it down there and let it sit. Now, in the early spring, the earlier, when the water temps still in the 40s, you get it down there and give it a good pop and let it sit. Your pauses are going to be longer, like 30 seconds to a minute. As the water temperature starts to warm up into the low 50s, now your pause is going to be like 6 seconds, 5 seconds, maybe only 3 seconds. Once you get up to the mid to upper 50s, sometimes it's a pop, 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 right? Pop. There's not a whole lot of pauses in between. So your cadence is going to vary depending on the water temperature. As for colors, I like to use flashy colors if the sun is out, so that it reflects that sun and can be seen from further distances. If it's really clear water, I like to use translucent colors, like those greens or those baitfish style colors. And then if the water's stained, then I'll use solid colors that resemble the baitfish that are in that lake. Typically a shad color, or maybe a perch color or a bluegill pattern. Those work really well. Those solid opaque colors work better in those dingy kind of water situations. But that's what you need to throw for suspending jerk baits. Another bait you want to be throwing in the springtime is a crankbait. Yeah, believe it or not, crankbaits actually work really well even when the water temperature is cooler. It's not just a spring and summer bait or a fall bait. A lot of people only throw them in the fall. In the early spring, they can be very productive. But again, remember I mentioned crawdads are highly targeted and highly favored forage base for the bass during this time of year. So I opt for crawdad pattern crankbaits as well. The green pattern ones I like to throw in clear water. The clearer the water, the better for those green colored crawdad patterns. And if the water is dingy or muddy, I'll go for the red craw. Yeah, red in early spring. Really good color. I like the Spro rock crawlers. Those work exceptionally well. You can get them in different diving depths. And in the early spring, like in the 40s, that's when you want to dive down deeper to about 12 feet deep and just bang it off those rocks and give it long pauses in between. As the water temperature warms up, go for a little bit shallower diving ones. Maybe the MD55 gets it down to about 8 feet. And again, banging it off those rocks, those stumps, off of objects, targeting those steeper banks, those points, those humps, any channel swings that come up close to the bank. Any of that is really good areas to throw those crankbaits. I like to throw it with a medium action rod and 12-pound fluorocarbon test. This is where I like to use Seaguar Tatsu line. It works really well. It's thin diameter, so it enables the lure to get all the way down to its deepest diving depth, and is really abrasion resistant. And of course, fluorocarbon sinks too, so it doesn't prevent the lure from getting all the way down to where it's supposed to. So that's my setup, and those are the lures I use, those crankbaits I use in spring. Now, one of my favorite baits to throw in the spring is the tube bait. Yeah, and that's because it's so versatile. There's so many different ways you can rig it, and that makes it so you can fish it in a variety of situations, a variety of water colors, different weather patterns, whether the bass are really active, and depending on if they're buried up in the bushes or if they're under docks or out in the open water. Typically what I do for early spring is I first like to throw tubes on the back of a split shot rig in deeper water. That's when the water temps are still in the 40s. And just slowly crawl along the bottom. Maybe a slight lifted up and down of the rod tip by maybe the 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock position, 9 o'clock to 11 position, and just drag it back down, let it sit, and slowly drag it on the bottom using spinning gear. I'm using a 16th ounce split shot with 6-pound fluorocarbon line. Generally this is Tatsu that I'm using, the Seaguar Tatsu, just because it's so limber and so sensitive. It doesn't interfere with the action of the bait. That's what I'll do when it's really cold out, or if you've got a good front that's come through and shut the fish down. That's a great way to go after them. Now, as the water temperature warms up, I'll put that on a flipping outfit. I'll put a flipping tube on there. There's a Trokar hook out there that I like to use. I'll put it on a 1/4 ounce to 3/8 ounce weight, nothing heavier than that. I'll even use braided line now, like 40-pound, 50-pound braided line. And now I'm throwing it, flipping and pitching it into heavy cover. Again, this is when the temperatures warm up into the low to mid 50s and the bass are getting ready to spawn. They'll use that cover as they move up into the shallows and sometimes bury up in there. You can go after them with a Texas rig tube this way and dig them out. It's an excellent way to catch a lot of fish with a tube. There's so many other ways you can fish a tube though. When the water temperature is in the low 50s and you got a lot of docks, rig it on a conventional tube jig. This is the kind of jig that's got the eye in towards the back. I shouldn't say back, but it's not at the front. The eye is offset away from the front of the jig. When you rig it this way, it's open water because you can see the hook, it'll snag on anything, so you can't throw it into heavy cover. But rigged this way, the tube will spiral, this death spiral. And that is just irresistible, the bass, pre-spawn bass particularly. I like to throw that around docks. You can skip it up under docks and let it spiral down inside the docks. Oh my goodness, that's a fun way of catching them. Alongside docks, any kind of open cover, again, boulders, points, rocky structures work really well for this, rocky cover. It's a great technique to use. I throw this on spinning gear, again with 6-pound fluorocarbon Tatsu line. You throw it out and basically you kind of just open the reel and let it do its thing, free fall. And just, you got to be a line watcher with this because sometimes the line, all it does is a little jump or it just starts peeling away from you really quickly. Or sometimes when you just reel up that slack, suddenly your line is swimming away from you and the fish has got it. So you got to be real astute, pay close attention to that line. It's not easy to do that technique when it's really windy out, so I wouldn't do it during the wind. But pretty much any other time during this time, when the water temperature is in the upper 40s to low 50s, that's a great time to throw that bait. The next lure for early spring fishing is a spinnerbait. Yeah, spinnerbait. I think a lot of guys think about spinnerbaits only in the warmer months, but man, I fish it year round, just so you know, just in full disclosure. Now, what I like to throw is two different kind of baits this time of year for as far as spinnerbaits goes. One is when the water temperature is super cold. I consider that below 50. So in the 40s, I'll throw a single Colorado style blade, white, 1/2 ounce. And what I like to do with that is throw it again in those steeper drops, those steeper points, steeper ledges. Throw it out there and just let it fall vertically. It's a horizontal presentation because it falls still, it's horizontal, but it falls vertically. The blade helicoptering as it falls. I can't tell you how many fish I catch doing that. Usually it's like 12 to 14 feet deep, a little bit deeper than that. You just throw it and let it fall straight down like you would a plastic or a jig or something like that, but you're using the spinnerbait instead. And it's a different look, a different presentation. A lot of guys don't throw that. I think that's the reason why it gets bit so much, at least for me. But that's a very effective way of catching, and I catch big fish doing that. So that's one way I'll use a spinnerbait. The other is I'll use a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait, Gold Blades, Hank Parker Classic spinnerbait. I've got a ton of them. I love that bait. It just in white with a twin tail trailer. Whew, say that fast. As a trailer on it. And again, I'll slow roll that. So get it down towards the bottom and just slowly crank your reel and just bump it along the bottom. I almost won a tournament, over 100 boats in this tournament, doing that, and it was cold. It was really cold. I mean, launch time was about 27, 28 degrees out. I was getting ice on the eyelets on my rod. Throwing it up at about 8 to 10 feet of water right in an area next to a spawning area. The bass were stacked up there getting ready to move up when the water was right. Then when the water temperatures were right around 50 degrees. And I was just slowly bringing it along, and you would think the bass would just kind of mouth it and walk off, but no, they clocked it. I mean, they were trying to rip the rod out of my hand. So be prepared for that. Even just because it's a slow presentation doesn't mean the bass aren't going to annihilate it. They will. But that technique works really well. And that water temperature is right in that, low 50s, low 50s, upper 40s. temperature range, slow rolling it can be very, very effective. As the water temperature warms up, target those outside weed lines, move up a little bit shallower, maybe along docks, but again, a moderate retrieve. You're not burning it back really quick. A lot of guys are used to doing spinner baits at a fast speed. I think that's why a lot of folks think it's only good in the warmer months, but a slower speed is a necessity during this time of year, and you'd be surprised how many fish you catch on them. I fish it with 15-pound Invisics fluorocarbon line, and with a 7-foot medium heavy fast action rod. It's like the universal jack of all trades. I've got one rigged and ready all the time, year round. That works universally for me. I can throw it no matter what kind of cover I'm throwing in, and I can catch a lot of fish that way. So those are the 5 top baits to use during the early spring. I hope you go out there and try them out and you catch a bunch. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.